Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our March 2026 meeting of the Media Ed Club of the Media Education Lab. My name is Wes Fryer, and I am so excited to have an opportunity to introduce to you Lucy Gray, who is coming to us from Chicagoland and is going to talk a little bit about media literacy for seniors, especially as she has been working in her local library and she has been gaining some more insights, which I'm so excited for her to share. So, if you want to go ahead and use the chat actually throughout our call, please do. We love to use our back channel. And if you want to tell us where you're coming from today, and if you want to share anything about the technology needs of seniors in your life, I just dropped a link to our slides, and then I'm also dropping a link to our interactive notes. You are welcome to add to those. Lucy's slides, she's going to be sharing those herself as she does her presentation, but those are linked in there. She's presenting from Gamma AI. If you're not familiar with that, I've seen her do that a lot. And so we'll do a few announcements and then I'll introduce her and we'll jump in. She's going to share for a while, and then if we have time, which we should have a little bit, we are going to do some whole group. We'll do some breakout rooms and then we'll do some whole group sharing as well. So as always, we've got an interactive notes document that goes back to October of 2024, I think, when I had the opportunity to start doing this for the lab. And you can access all the links to not only the recordings and the slides, but also the resources that are related to every topic. And in terms of announcements, I am pretty excited about this. I updated this form today. So this is a form, and some of you have filled it out, but if you're willing to fill it out again, I'm inviting you to share where you share. And the way I've changed it this time is I've specified the open and then the closed online spaces. And I'm going to mention the Thrive conference here in a minute, but one of the things that I'm actually presenting about is this idea of sort of reclaiming our news feeds. And so one of the things that not everybody realizes is that depending upon where you're sharing, that affects whether or not you can openly access those things. So Blue Sky, YouTube, Mastodon, Substack, WordPress, those all allow us to sort of bring the feeds together, and we could create a community hub and a community portal of things that have been shared by those in our community. Places like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Spoutable, I think. Actually, I don't know about Spoutable. I need to check. You may have never heard of Spoutable before, but it's a place to share, microblogging. Threads allows you to share to the Fediverse. But anyway, please check that out. I dropped that link in. It is in our slides, and I really, really do think that the opportunity to collaborate and share is so important. I just have loved being a part of this Media Education Lab community, and I continue to believe that, I won't sing, but we've only just begun in terms of sharing and the good things that we can do together because we're passionate about media literacy and advancing the cause of media education and being able to do that. We're all in different places with our sharing, but the purpose of inviting you to share where you share is to basically amplify your voice and allow us to connect with each other because we are in a very fractured and polluted media world. So, as always, I want to encourage you to please visit the events page of the Media Education Lab. We have an excellent march of events focusing on news literacy, the Media Ed Jam. Actually, Lucy, I don't know if you know this, it's happening in Chicago face to face on March 12th. They're working on having an online component to be able to access some of those, but it's a face-to-face research jam on the 18th, leading from the library, navigating the AI landscape with learning communities. I know we're probably going to have a number of librarians interested in this session. The Together We Rise community continues to meet on March 23rd, leading from the library, fun and games with copyright on March 25th, teaching the ethics of advertising also coming up on the 25th. And then what's happening in Massachusetts? We've got a number of states doing some wonderful things with media literacy at a state level, and Massachusetts is one of those. I know that Illinois has been working on that too, and it's just great to hear about the collaborations that are happening locally and the lessons that we can learn for our particular area, community, state. This is the number one big announcement, and I'm so excited that the Media Education Lab is a formal partner of this conference. It's the Thrive United for Democracy and Global Action. We actually have the most I guess the founder of the Thrive conference, the main catalyst, and that's Lucy Gray. But Lucy has so much experience with online conferences, and for I think over a year, many months, Lucy and a team have been preparing for this. So it happens this Wednesday and Thursday. Live conferences or live sessions are free. For a small fee, you can have asynchronous later access to all content. And I just think it's super important that we collaborate the values that we share when it comes to democracy and human rights and education for all. There's a lot of them. They're important. And the Thrive Conference. So you can go to the Substack, which is thriveedu.substack.com, and you can learn more. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Lucy. And she probably hadn't seen that picture in a while because that's 11 years old. Lucy and I have known each other for quite a while. Actually, the screenshot on the left is her family learning blog. I was asking her before we started how old her kids are because we're similar ages and our kids have kind of grown up and have shared stuff online. I was listening to, I think, your son Henry reading, from like 2009 or something. It's still a video that's there. We were in Montana at the Blackfoot conference back in August of 2012. That might have been the last time we were in the same room together. I'm not sure, but I just continue to learn so much from Lucy. She has several Substacks, but her main educational technology one that I follow is Eliminations. You could maybe tell us the story of where that came from, but because that's kind of been her handle. But anyway, I am so excited to introduce Lucy to you. I will drop this link in. Her presentation slides are on Gamma. I'm going to go ahead and stop my sharing and invite Lucy to share. I will be dropping this link in so that you can access her slides. And please join me in a warm greeting for Lucy Gray. Yay!
Thank you for having me, Wes. It's good to be here with you. It's always fun to collaborate with you. And you're someone who is even more techie than I am and nerdy with all these tools and everything. So I always am learning from you. And it's been at least 20 years, I think, at this point, that we've known each other. And so it's an honor to be here. And I appreciate the opportunity to share something that's kind of new to me. Um, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Lucy Gray. I consider myself a non-traditional educator. I worked in Chicago Public Schools as a primary grade teacher for a number of years, got a master's degree in educational technology, and moved to the University of Chicago Laboratory Schools, where I taught computer science for 7 years. Then worked for different parts of the university that ran charter schools and did science education and math education things for 3 years before going into consulting full time. And during that time too, I became an Apple Distinguished Educator and was part of Google's early on efforts with education when there was only like 4 people running the show. So my background is varied, and I've worked with schools, nonprofits, companies all over. But in 2018, I decided it was time to go back into a school and apply what I had learned in my adventures. And so I went to work for a small independent school. Most of my teaching has been independent school world. And I'm also an independent school graduate. So I went to work for this small school near me, and it was a one-to-one iPad school, and pedagogy was valued over tech. And it was, I mean, there were so many good things about it. The pandemic hit and we got through it pretty well. But then in November of 2020, I was told that my position was going to be eliminated because they were combining my position with the manager of IT's position. I was the director of educational technology. They were combining it with the manager of IT because he had left the school, and making a director of technology. So someone who knew the boxes and wires and who knew the pedagogical foundations for educational technology. We all know, if anybody's worked in that world, that's a unicorn. It's hard to find someone who does that. I wasn't eligible to apply for that job, and it broke my heart. So for the next 6 months or so, I had to stick around knowing that I was going to leave and prepping myself for the next phase. And going back into consulting, coaching in schools and that sort of thing was really kind of a different animal at that point. Post-pandemic, people weren't letting a lot of strangers into their schools. There wasn't, people had in-house technology stuff. And a string of really hard things happened to me and my family. My husband was laid off. I had breast cancer. We had a small fire in our house. We had a flood from a bathroom. And it just seemed like things were going downhill fast. And also, I was at a point in my life where I felt like ageism was really kind of kicking in, and and it was difficult to get I was a finalist for 5 jobs, 2 with companies, 3 with independent schools, and got none of them, no offers. And so it was a devastating time, and I had to rebuild. And I'm telling you this because I'm pretty candid about my life and so on and so forth. But I'm telling you this because it leads into how I got to the library. And so I live in Northbrook, Illinois, and our public library is probably one of the best things about our town. I This has been one of my favorite places since we moved here, I don't know, 15 years ago. And they had a job opening for someone working as a library assistant with technology expertise. And I applied and I got the job. I was surprised. So for the last 2 years, I've been working for 22 hours a week at the library on the reference desk, but also teaching classes and doing one-to-one appointments. And I'll go into that in a little bit. And it's been a game changer. It has helped me get my confidence back. It's helped me feel more connected to my community. I'm not being paid particularly well, but I don't mind because it's a really satisfying experience. And this library is probably the most functional place I've ever worked in comparison to schools. Everything is really well thought out. We have an amazing executive director who I recommend following on LinkedIn. Her name is Kate Hall. She's very into technology and AI. She's written books. She's done a lot of mentoring of people. She's an exemplary leader, and there's a process and a place for everything in this library. It's phenomenal. And I think it's appreciated by the community too. We get a lot of positive feedback from people. So I'm going to get into this, and that's kind of where I'm coming from. And so for the past 2 years, I've been digging into, and our largest patron population are seniors, people over 65 who are coming in for help. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences with that and how that fits in with media literacy and how our program is set up. So these are the kinds of scenarios I meet in my job. For example, I had a woman come in a couple weeks ago, and AT&T is eliminating landlines in Illinois, and I didn't know that, and because I don't have a landline anymore. And this woman was really upset. I mean, to the point of tears of this because she didn't understand the lingo that was sent along with it and what her options were. And she was used to having a phone in several places in her house so that she could easily access it. She didn't really want to drag a cell phone around with her everywhere she went. And I did a little research, and yes, lo and behold, AT&T is getting rid of landlines. And so they have till next March, seniors, and it sounds like the state the utility board here kind of fought this for a while, and it finally came through. And so next March, that's going to happen for people. And I think that's a problem. And so those kinds of decisions made by companies impact people much more than they think. I'm seeing that a lot. And that's one example. I had another financially challenged patron come in and want to do a GoFundMe page, and she didn't know how it worked. She didn't know where to go. It wasn't logical to her to go to GoFundMe.com. And she left and came back one day, or she was getting ready to leave, and she thought she had lost all of her work. But it was saved because she just moved from page to page in the process. So there was a lot of kind of navigational issues for her. And she was also very upset because something was going on that caused her to make this GoFundMe. And then another example is I see people all the time with password problems. And we tell people not to write passwords down, but that's like for some people, that's the only option. And a password manager is probably a better idea. But I see people with folders, with notebooks, with everything written in down that they carry with them. It's their Bible. And if they didn't have that, they would be lost. And sometimes people come in and don't have that information and they don't know how to recover it either. So we see this all the time. So these are not just tech issues, they're infrastructure issues, they're literacy issues. There's so many issues. And how can we make things easier and better and support all people with this sort of thing? That's kind of what I'm thinking. So, we've defined digital literacy as, mostly operational kinds of skills, how to use Microsoft Word or whatever. Media literacy is something a little bit different. It's emphasizing information analysis and that sort of thing, and figuring out what's real and what's not. But how do those two mesh? How do we, I think in this reality now that we have to have kind of a robust framework that will, for all learners, not just seniors, but of digital competence. How do we help people become digitally competent? And it's not necessarily an age thing, too. I want to preface that. Um, there are people, I learned the first time I used a computer was to do SAT prep when I was a senior in high school in 1984. And I got a typewriter for a graduation present. And my first real word process document was my senior thesis, written on 5 floppy disks on a Mac in the science lab of my college. So I'm self-taught, and I've been taught not to be afraid of technology. But if you haven't been in the workforce in the last 25 years or 30 years or 40 years, I guess in my case, then you may have some issues. And we do see that at the library with a lot of women who, particularly who've maybe been stay-at-home moms or whatever, have not had that experience. And so, but then there's people in my ADE program and my Apple Distinguished Educator program who are probably in their 70s and 80s who are doing amazing things with technology. They are not afraid of it because they've always used it. It's always been part of their vernacular. So and then I also see people younger than me coming in and not being able to do things too. So it's a matter of experience in my view in general. And so how do we help people become more digitally competent? So these are the kinds of things that we see in the library. A dependence on Apple ID. People have a hard time knowing what their Apple ID is and what that means. Email is kind of their master key to everything. I had one patron last week who uh, didn't know he only uses 2 passwords supposedly and has one email account, and it wasn't working. And we tried to reset it with a new email account, and Microsoft wanted to know uh, to bring the account back. His last emails, who he sent them to, their subject lines, anything to kind of verify it. It was crazy. And then he didn't know. And they'd end up not verifying him to get into his old account. Long story. This is very typical um, of the experience I see in the library with seniors. And it's about understanding identity architecture literacy. That's another literacy that we have to think about. And I'm not sure if companies are thinking about how seniors are doing things. Another example is the state of Illinois wanted people to like fax in or upload some sort of proof for maybe it was for a handicapped license plate, something like that, or something. It was something with the Department of Aging, and they just assume that people can scan and upload things with ease, and that is not the case at all. So those are some examples of the kinds of things that I'm seeing. So with the verification stuff, I'm sure you guys have experienced this. You need to confirm this, click this, put in this code, whatever. It's just too much and it's too different. There's so many different processes that each company does differently. So, um, you know, they just it's a nightmare and it's compounded by stress. This is a very stressful experience for the patrons that I work with. And so we get into this spiral and sometimes I can't help them because we get to the end of the road, we try everything possible and we can't get into their email or whatever account it is. Another thing that I see is a lot of like, I can't do this, I'm stupid, I'm not very technology literate. And so there's this psychological barrier that comes into to play as well. And so, how do we help people become more digitally confident? And it just it is it drives me crazy when people say this, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, oh, I'm not good at this, because it doesn't help. And I don't, I think maybe they think they're being self-deprecating, but I feel like um something's missing from how we prepare them to be confident and self-directed learners. One of the things that I tried to do with the teachers I worked with when I was working in schools was to teach people how to fish as opposed to fishing for them. And I think that's kind of the mentality that we want to have here too, is how do we help people figure things out on their own? I did have a 93-year-old patron the other day who was an Android user. He had come to my iPhone class to kind of check me out to see if I could do a program for his senior residency place. And he uses ChatGPT all the time to answer questions and things like that for himself. He knows how to, if he doesn't know the answer, he knows there's another tool or place that he can go to get an answer, and he's not afraid to try that. For a lot of people of all ages, it doesn't occur to them to Google it or to go to YouTube and look for a video. And sometimes people don't want to look at a video too. So, finding the your self-help path is really empowering, and we need to figure out how to do that. Um, so there's a lot of stuff that comes into play with this too. There's a learned helplessness that I think goes into everything that I just referred to. I think people are concerned about whether they're declining cognitively, and that really varies from person to person. But there's a lot of different things that we have to take into consideration when working with seniors, and what they're bringing to the table, and developing an empathy for them and for these situations is really, really important. And I don't have the solution for how we handle that. I just try to listen and to document and to support and to encourage them to come into the library as much as possible. Another thing that we're seeing is interface confusion and design friction. Um, there's too many overlays and pop-ups and people clicking on them. They don't know how to fill out forms and then scan it and then upload it, as I mentioned earlier. I see a lot of people struggling with like their phone getting their iCloud account getting full and not knowing what to do. So these are some of the kinds of other things that come into play that can affect your financial, medical, social life in general, if you don't know how to navigate well and handle these things. So these are some of the common things that we see as well. So, I find it problematic that the systems that are in place are not necessarily geared towards everyone. Maybe they haven't applied universal design for learning principles. But digital systems are assuming that people can multitask, can remember things, have prior knowledge of how things work in general, and a tolerance for trial and error. And as we age, yeah, our processing speed is going down. Our short-term memory is definitely reduced. And certain things become a little bit more difficult. So small text. And again, that confidence factor is lessening in general. Repeating things, people need to be able to repeat things several times before they really learn it. So there's I feel like there's kind of a mismatch between what the companies are designing for and how people are aging and the reality of that. Especially with this baby boomer generation. And this is a significant amount of people who are probably struggling with issues. So what can we do to do this? How do we go from rescue to empowerment? And I think, building intergenerational tech support networks and communities is important. We have a new volunteer coordinator, and I'm hoping that we can work with her to get some teenagers perhaps to come in for community service projects and be like a second chair on my classes, for example. Doing peer mentoring, we don't do that yet, but I think that's something that we could certainly do. Helping seniors to designate a legacy contact for their digital information is really key. I've done that with my Apple and my Google accounts. So if my account is like for Google, if my account's like inactive for 6 months, then the email goes to my primary contact, which is my husband. And so he'll be able to get into my account. I don't think people think about these things. And especially with my Apple account, which has all my photos, I think I put my daughter as the legacy contact there. So these are some of the things that we can do. If you're not familiar with universal design for learning, there are principles that are meant to be put in place for designing learning experiences that appeal to lots of different ways of learning. I think written guides are good in addition to video tutorials. I think most people older people like something written. And building into professional development or these kinds of learning classes, repetition and reinforcement, and going fairly slow with things. I also think that in the design of my classes, I'm trying to build in some social aspects to it too, because I think that people learn more and better when there's a social piece to it. And I think that's also really important for adult learners in general. So here's our infrastructure, how we do it. And we don't, we've never formally kind of documented what we do. And this presentation kind of allowed me to kind of think about that. These slides were done in an generative AI tool called Gamma, which is amazing, but it's based on information that I gave it and then tweaked. And what it did was really help me kind of organize in a coherent way what we do. And I think this is important. You know, I gave this to my boss saying if we ever need to talk about what we do, maybe this would be helpful. Um, so having some self-paced assessment and learning tools is particularly helpful, I think. We're just getting started with something called North Star Digital Literacy. It's a program from a nonprofit in Minneapolis. I think we pay $500 a year for a certain amount of licenses, and people can make free learner accounts and go through these modules. They're super basic, but there's everything from, you know, Microsoft Word to sending a text to cybersecurity type of topics. And so I'm offering the first class to get people started in it, and then they can go off and do it their own. And it's almost filled. You know, we have 15 seats and 13 are filled right now, which is good for us. And so I'm expecting that we'll probably have a waiting list by the time the class rolls around at the end of March. And this way, and when I tell people about this, people have stopped by our reference desk and asked about it. They're like relieved. That embarrassment factor, you know, of not knowing what to do and who to ask, is taken away a little bit. The other thing I see too, which I haven't mentioned, is a lot of our seniors have asked their kids for help, and their kids have no patience whatsoever in supporting them. And I was like that with my parents, and both my parents are gone now, and I feel like I can redeem myself and be a better human by helping others. And having more patience and tolerance and understanding of what they're going through. And also a lot of children also give their parents, their older technology, which I think is a really bad idea. So this kind of takes away that stress, you know, having this library support from relying on a family member to do these kinds of things for you. So the, you know, tier one is having some sort of do-it-yourself kind of thing that people can get started with, but also jump starting it for them and have them come in and get started and set up their accounts and get in so they understand what they're doing. Then our tier two solution is group learning. We do a variety of classes, not necessarily geared towards seniors, but we end up having majority of seniors in these. And I've really, over the last 2 years, tried to tweak the kinds of content that I share with people. I try to make it really step-by-step directions that mirror what we do in the class, taking time to do some hands-on stuff, circulating. Sometimes I have another library assistant work with me as an assistant, which helps me, you know, us cover everybody and make sure that they're learning at the same pace. And also the other thing I've learned too is that making some opportunities for social sharing. So for instance, in an iPhone basics class, I ask people what model they have and show them how to do that. And they tell me, and I say, what's your biggest conundrum? And everybody hears what everybody else's issue is. And that helps people kind of feel connected. I also ask them to pair and share with somebody next to them on certain topics, which I think helps them feel a little bit more connected and they get to know somebody a little bit. So those kinds of things can be built into group learning so that you're bridging generations that you may be serving. It's people making people feel that they're part of it, that you're paying attention to what they want and need. And I think it's super important. And most people in our surveys and our evaluations want in-person classes. We are doing virtual stuff, but I think the in-person piece is really important. And we all know that being socially connected as a senior is crucial to your health, your mental health and well-being in general. These are some of the topics that we cover. My generative AI class and my iPhone classes are the most popular. We also have outside presenters that come in and do topics like we did one on cutting the cable and that sort of thing. But these are kind of the core things that people seem to want and need. We also do something, tier 3 would be drop-in crisis support. We call it Tech Tuesday. There are three of us at the library who are on duty where people can drop in for like 15-minute appointments with their with whatever issue they're having. And they'll do, I had one guy that came in with like a 10-year-old Garmin, uh I don't even know even what to call it, like a geocaching thing. Or maybe actually it was a thing you put in your car. And then he brought in all this old legacy technology and wanted us to help him get it up and working. And that was really challenging. I don't think we were able to help him very much. So it's these things like that, or people stopping by and saying, "Can you teach me how to do this with my phone?" Or I had a guy last week who couldn't install his older software for a Canon scanner. And I showed him how to use Preview on a Mac to do the scanning as opposed to relying on outside software, things like that. And so our nearest Apple store was a mile away in a mall that is now virtually dead, and they closed in last April. And so, I don't know, 5 to 10 miles away is the nearest Apple store, which is not terribly close in our area. And so they can't run to the Apple store for help necessarily. Apple does have, and most of the people that we're working with have Apple devices, by the way, but we do have some Android users. Apple online support is really good, and I believe that there's a way now that they can take over your device and help you with it. I know through the Messages app, you can do that yourself with between people. So either by calling them or their text, I think they have a texting component, or by going into the store. I'm very fascinated by how well Apple employees serve their customers. And I don't know what training they do. I think it'd be really interesting to find out, because they all seem to have a lot of empathy. I notice they're all looking everybody in the eye. There's some body language going on. And in schools, sometimes schools hire former Apple store employees as their IT personnel because they have that personable skill set. So we offer this drop-in. We're the next best thing to the Apple store. There are three of us with a variety of experience and that can help people in general. We also we do one-to-one sessions. Each patron can have a half-hour one-to-one session with us per month. Sometimes it goes longer. I tend to help people longer than a half an hour. And my supervisor is about a year in on her job, and she brought us Draft, which is a scheduling software that allows patrons to book. It's customized for our scenario, to book appointments with us on certain times. So there's an appointment calendar basically online for different topics and people, including Apple, Google, Microsoft stuff. And people can book online. A lot of people can't book online, so they can also call us and we'll fill out the form for them. So going to the library website and filling out a form is challenging for some people, and we have to keep that in mind. And then we're developing reinforcement tools. How we're using them really varies. We've created a session notes form. We're not using it that much. Where we write down what we're doing with people so that they have something to take home and remember the steps and that sort of thing. We've also created one-step handouts on common topics that we can hand out to people. And then on our website, we have 5 million e-resources. So we have LinkedIn Learning right now, which is former lynda.com. It is overwhelming, I think, to the average user. And it's expensive, and we're not getting a lot of use out of it. So we're switching to Udemy for kind of higher order things. We also use BrainFuse, which has a couple of different components, including some basic technology classes. Something called Learning Express Library, which I think through, we have like a statewide license to a bunch of tools, and I think it's through EBSCO or something like that. And then North Star Digital Library for self-paced skill development. So having those, being able to point people to those things, and having a handout or something that lists them is really important. So those are the kinds of ways that we're supporting our patrons. Now we have a structure because I did this presentation, but we've been, I think the library's been doing that for a while before I came, and we're just kind of tuning it up. Um, so, this work becomes media literacy with seniors because we have to navigate different kinds of spaces. We have to help them distinguish scams from legitimate alerts. We have to have them understand how, who's what's coming from who and what's official. Understanding corporate transitions when things are changed, like the AT&T scenario. Being able to figure out what's suspicious and what's authentic. And then now we have AI generation too. What is synthetic and what is real? And so persuasion literacy is embedded in this infrastructure. Every digital interaction requires both operational competence and critical analysis. It's not just digital literacy or media literacy, it's both into this, digital competence that we're talking about. So, these are some of the things that I think that we need to think about and maybe plan classes around these kinds of topics, or at least incorporate elements into the classes that we're teaching to seniors or to any adult, really. The kinds of things here. How are you touching upon identity literacy, authentication literacy? How are seniors, how do we talk to them about managing their stress around this stuff? So it's just not the content that we're worried about. This is survival for a lot of people. And a loss of, if they don't master some of these things, it's also a loss of a connection to family, to health information, to financial information and monitoring of accounts and that sort of thing. So how do we figure it out? I threw this slide in today of some examples, and this is AI generated, so I have not verified these, but these are some of I wanted some examples of studies or anything that might be helpful. And Toronto Public Library is one of the more innovative libraries out there. They keep coming up in my informal research on things. Senior Planet through AARP is a great resource. This is a study that was cited by them. You can take a look at these, in the slides and see if I'm sure they're fine, but just double check them. But I think this is interesting. It's meeting seniors where they are. And it's multiple ways of outreach. It's not just having people come to the library. And we're starting to partner a little bit with some of the senior living facilities around us. And I think we already do some outreach to them, but not necessarily tech classes. So I think that's also really, really important. So this is some of the other research that was cited when I added this slide, in terms of, if we're thinking about redesigning things, when the user interface in general, you can reduce the cognitive load. You can help people complete tasks, and if you are intentional with your design, you're going to see growth in your programming in general. So here's some other resources to take a look at in terms of how to, the evidence piece of it. So I'd like to leave with this one thought, and that is that media literacy can't stop at graduation in a K-12 school. It has to extend for a lifetime. And in being being a senior, there's some high stakes stuff going on there for people, and they need to be able to navigate accordingly, and or else they'll miss out on a lot of great information at the very least. So that's kind of my thought is like, how do we, I want to encourage people to think about how we support seniors and make them feel seen and heard, um, and that they're not inferior for not knowing how to do something. It's about building confidence for them. And I also want to show you something too. This is a tool that I've built. This is a Google notebook, and I'll show you what it looks like in a minute, where I'm compiling research and things like that, and using it as a tool to kind of plan for my classes and outreach. Google Notebook is an AI generative tool. It is amazing. Um, and this is what it looks like. You can put 300, and you guys can join this notebook and look at it. You do need to have a Google account to do that. So just be aware that you have to log in with a Google account when you go to that link. So on the left-hand side of a notebook are sources, and you can add sources that are any kind of, I don't know if it's any kind of file, but PDFs, docs, um, pictures, even, I guess, stuff from your Google Drive, stuff that you've copied and pasted. You can also do fast research on the web, or you can do a deeper research generation within the notebook. And those sources are stored over here. So here's an example of a deep research report that I generated and put into this notebook around different questions that I've had about working with seniors. And I've also put in, articles and websites that have, that might be helpful. So this notebook will only, when you ask it a question in the chat here in the middle, it will only source, it will only refer to that content. It's not going to look over the whole internet. And so you can put in, they have some suggested questions here, but you can also type in your own. And I'm just going to click on one of these prompts. How is AI impacting healthcare and safety for older adults? And it starts digging into the information on the left-hand side. And in a minute, it will produce a document. And we'll see how that looks like in a second. So you can change how you want this chat to work as a learning guide or custom role. You can say you want it to be longer or shorter, so you can kind of control the output. And so you'll see here that it's sharing information about how AI is impacting the healthcare and safety for older adults. And it also refers, you see these little numbers here? These are citations to the information in my sources of where that came from, which I think is really cool. So here's this document. And if I like what I see and want to save it, I can click it on here. It says save to a note. And it goes over into my studio on the right-hand side. And the studio is where all my artifacts are. So here is the document, AI in the future of senior care, that I saved from this chat. And then I can clear my chat and do another one if I want to. So in my studio, I can do that. I can use things that are generated from chat, but I can also make all these wild things here. And this is like magic to me.
The audio summaries are just incredible. I've just used those in multiple contexts.
Yeah, so this is an example of one. On our life experience and ensure our future selves stay connected. Is the science of learning for the longevity economy. So this is like an overview. I guess I must have, it's a really short overview. This is the brief on Geragogy and senior learning. So today we're unpacking Geragogy, the science of teaching adults over 60. So you can do an audio overview. When you click on the pencil, you can do a brief. That one was a brief. You can do a critique, a debate. You can make it short or long. You can even do it in another language, which also helps with accessibility stuff. And you can do a deep dive. And the deep dive is it's like a fake podcast based on your information with two hosts talking to each other. And you can actually interrupt it and ask it questions. It's crazy. That was the first thing that they built into this notebook, and every month Google is adding something to this. It keeps on going. It's just amazing. So it's made infographics for me. So here's an infographic that it designed. Sometimes the spelling is a little off, so you have to make sure that you can edit. You can see the prompt that you used and then copy and paste that and do another one and say, make sure you spell everything correctly.
Or you can even download it and put it right back into Gemini and then a banana, and it'll
fix it.
tweak that. Yeah, and you can now bring these notebooks directly into Gemini conversation.
Mhm.
So, well, what I'd like to do is just briefly go to breakout rooms just to give everybody a chance. We
Yeah.
got about 14 of us here. Can y'all give Lucy a virtual round of applause? Fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and open up breakout rooms. And what I want to invite you to do is basically talk about what new thoughts you're having for media literacy when it comes to seniors. Okay, this always happens. We've got a few folks dropping out. So I'm gonna put us
Why don't
in.
we just
It's
do
a,
one room and talk? Do we
well,
have to go to breakouts?
yeah, I guess we can. I guess we can. Usually people are a little bit more, but no, let's do. You're right. We're kind of at the end. So, all right, skip the breakout rooms. What questions do y'all have? Just grab the microphone and you can raise your hand if you want to. Um, but let's toss some questions Lucy's way. Yeah, go ahead, Solomon.
Hi, Lucy. Hi, Wes. Thank you for this session. I really enjoyed. I'm part of Media Education Lab since 2020, and my first role at Media Education Lab was to do help desk support for
Yeah.
teacher professional development event, and it was so inspiring to me that now I'm doing PhD at Georgia State University, currently based in Atlanta, Georgia. And my dissertation, which I am working on right now, it's about intergenerational learning in the workplaces in the technology area. So many things that you've touched on are very, I mean, I can relate and I can also, it's very powerful. And I'm really glad that you emphasize the importance of self-esteem and psychological support for older adults and also intergenerational support. So thank you for that. My brief question is about, again, self-esteem, because from my perspective, when I look at aging and communication and technology adoption, I focus on what messages we hear from outside world about what older adults can do and how it really shapes what they do with their technology at home and when they are alone. So I was just wondering, what's your observation in terms of their psychological stances when they show up at your desk?
So I guess we're getting kind of a self-selected population of people who know that they need help and they need somewhere to go. So we're not seeing the technology savvy ones particularly. Sometimes we are. Uh, but I feel like I'm turning 60 this year and feel like the older you get, the more invisible you become. And it doesn't have to be that way. And but it's a matter of confidence in general. So I see a lot of people who are struggling with life stuff. I see a lot of vulnerable people. And I'm in a pretty affluent community, so I may not be seeing it as much as other places, but it just seems to me I've learned that libraries are the heart of a community sometimes, and they're the place. It's everybody's place, right? Like it would be really easy to be judgy about people, but that's not our role at all. Like there are people that come in that my eyebrows are raised and my colleagues are non don't have any reaction because it's meant to be a public space. Whomever you are, whatever you represent or present, that's okay in this space. We're very concerned about privacy. Um, so it's an interesting conundrum. Like sometimes you're like, I think it'd be very easy to fall into the trap. Like, can you believe this person did this? Or can you believe this person doesn't know how to open an email or whatever? It'd be very easy to fall into the trap of being judgmental. And I just don't think it's helpful or healthy. And so I've tried to stop myself when something could be annoying or I try to kind of put myself in their shoes. So I do see that the mental piece of it is huge. Some libraries are now hiring social workers and I don't know what that looks like. Our community has social workers through the police department that I just learned about. I have not had any interaction with them whatsoever, but I don't think that's a bad thing because there are a lot of vulnerable people who don't have access to technology, people who don't have access to housing. We have a couple of unhoused people that are regular patrons. Um, people who just need a quiet, safe space who are coming in and having somebody available to do things beyond books is, I think, not you can't go wrong with that, right?
Lucy, my dad is 85. He's our only parent that's still with us. And of course he knows I present and stuff. So he's wrote me into doing some AI really awareness sessions at his retirement community in Manhattan, Kansas. And I think those are good, but it kind of feels like parlor tricks a little bit, right? Because I'm like, woo, look at this, we can do this. What do you think is a real good practical offering? You said the iPhone and the AI sessions are real popular, but for a group like that, if I wanted to do something that would be sort of practical, I mean, I know password managers are important, but
Yeah.
do you have suggestions for things that move beyond, let's say, the AI parlor tricks to like really help people grapple with some things, but to do that in sort of a whole group, not a one-on-one, but something that we would do together?
Yeah, something I think, well, the way I do my AI class, it's an hour and a half thing. We start out um, doing something fun. We use Padlet and we generate a photo, a picture in the AI piece of Padlet and upload it to a common Padlet, and everybody can see each other's prompts and pictures. And that way I can kind of see who's struggling with the technology and who's not. So that kind of collaborative thing is a fun piece of it. We're planning our next cycle of classes right now. And I think breaking things down into, I tend to be really overwhelming in general. And I know you are too, Wes, because we're so excited and we love all this stuff and like we live and breathe it. But thinking about how you can break it down to like minute concrete pieces is important. And that's where AI can help you. Like I do a lot of my generation of my classes as an outline in ChatGPT or Claude, and then kind of break it down and ask the chatbot for advice on making it more simple or more user friendly. So that's how I use it to design. But I would also say um, it could be something like a photo walk. Let's do a photo walk and go take some pictures, and we'll do a little bit of we'll do a little bit of teaching before to show you how to use your camera better, no matter what your device is. Or it could be using ChatGPT for travel, or um, you know, creating, maybe something like recipes or, gym, exercises for, chair yoga poses that everybody could do. So thinking about what those are a little bit parlor tricks too. Like I don't see seniors necessarily using it for the kinds of things that I'm doing. Like I don't think a senior's going to want to go build a Google notebook, but they want the practical things that are going to improve their lives. So, and maybe making it smaller than you think you have to, in terms of the scope of the project of the class is really important, I would say. And I'm still struggling with that, trying to make things really simple.
That's good. Thanks. Yeah. The password stuff I know is big and we did
Uh,
that at school and password manager. And we've even talked at our church about like offering that in terms of folks who are not using a password manager, have the same repeated password, have been, hacked or had identity theft.
Email management, how do you folders, things like that, getting control of your inbox.
Yeah.
I think that's also a huge thing too. And
Barbara,
then,
go
and
ahead.
the storage of a photo stuff is always a huge thing, and storage on your device is always huge.
I am one of those people that's got a zillion and a half pieces of paper and then the password changes like what a mess.
Yeah.
How do I find password manager? Is there a charge for that?
So there's different tools. At the library, we use something called LastPass, which is an app, and it's also built into it's like a browser thing. And then there's another one password. Is that
One password is what we use. Bitwarden is probably the third. I sometimes look at sort of the Tom's Guide best password managers, but
Okay.
those are
and
when we pay for a family account, but Bitwarden I think is free for an individual.
and then Apple now has the password app, which is their answer to that. And so I haven't needed to pay for. I was using one password and I stopped paying for it and went to the Apple stuff and Chrome. So I use Chrome as my browser, and it remembers passwords too.
Okay, so Apple app and Apple because I'll try that. I
Yeah.
can't afford to pay for anything right
Yeah, and
now.
that's the other issue that I see is that we need to find as much at the library. We don't like to recommend things that you have to pay for in general. because we really want things to be open access. But and with the AI stuff in general, like I don't know how people are going to get around that. There's an equity issue there. I pay $20 a month for ChatGPT and for Claude, and I use them. I get my money's worth. But for a lot of people, that's not possible. And so the access to using those generative AI tools is going to be really limited for people unless we have some free versions of that kind of stuff. And I don't know what the answer is to that.
Because there are big differences in the model you use.
Yes, totally.
Lucy, just to let you know, I have used Apple Tech and they are fantastic.
Yeah.
And they will come on your screen if you agree, whether it's your phone or your computer. So just to let you know, they are wonderful.
Yeah.
They're nice too.
It,
People are
it's
nice.
it's great that they've been trained well, and so
Yeah.
like it's gone into that. I'm really curious about, and I just think that and Apple in general, the other thing that we haven't talked about, Wes, this is what another topic you could do is accessibility features on your iPhone. There are so many things you can do. It's overwhelming.
I feel like my dad, though, could do an ad for that. My father has wet macular degeneration, and he has done so much of that. But I'm like wondering who doesn't know this because there's so many different tricks
Uh,
that help.
if you look at the accessibility settings in your iPhone settings app, uh, some of them are you know maybe not all of us would use. Like you can connect your iPhone to your hearing aids. And I know you can do that on Android too. But there are ones in there that you wouldn't necessarily, you're not going to use because you have a disability necessarily, but it just makes things easier. Like there's something called assistive touch, which gives like shortcuts to different parts of your phone and you can customize it. So that would be, I just did a workshop on that and I picked like 10 things and I probably should have picked five of what to show people. And people don't know how to take a full advantage of their devices in general on the Android or the iPhone side. So that's something to think about too. So Apple's really good. What I was going to say was Apple is excellent with accessibility. They've been the leaders in this area for a long time. If you look at their accessibility page on their website, at least the last time I looked, they had videos of people like in wheelchairs using the switches on their headpiece to manipulate and make movies. um, there's you can use spoken word stuff and like tell the computer exactly what to do without ever touching it with some of these accessibility features. And so getting people empowered and comfortable with using those, it's another animal because it's remembering how to do all these things and having it become a second nature to what you do. That's important.
Well, it is the top of the hour. I've got to go to assembly with our middle
Yeah,
school.
fun.
Can you all give Lucy a round of applause? This was absolutely fantastic. I have dropped Lucy's Substack in. Please check out the Thrive
Yeah,
Conference. Again, I think we've only just begun to
yeah.
collaborate with each other because these tools are continuing to get better. The world is sort of more complicated with more channels and more things, but the personal element, and I just love so many things about what you shared. So Salome, definitely, we should probably have you on showing about your dissertation too, because it's a huge continuation of these.
I'd love to come back and be part of the club. Can I do that?
You can, please do. That's right. All you need to do is that Zoom link and registration. And yep, we're here. In fact, we'll be here for April 6th. If you've got ideas for sessions, we are continuing through the summer too. So first Monday, usually noon
Maybe,
Eastern.
maybe you and I can do something on civic literacy or
That
civic.
would be
civic
wonderful. Yeah. Or
yeah,
or yeah, even a report back from the Thrive conference would be
yeah,
something that
yeah,
we could do.
yeah.
We'll talk. All right. Well,
Thanks.
hey, thanks everybody.
Thank
Thanks.
you
So
so
Please
much,
continue.
Wes. Always a great program, always something to learn.
Well, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Barbara,
it's
for
true. I wouldn't
being a
say it.
part.
I'm from New York City. I don't.
All
Thank
right.
you, Lucy. Bye bye for now.